Merry Christmas. Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 79. Thank you for joining us. Today, Hope, Bonnie's sister, steps forward from backstage to join Bonnie, Jordan, and I for this In Between the Years episode. In this episode, we discuss Jordan's new book, Hope's introduction to Kolbe, the long road to conversion, and the importance of routines. We hope that you'll enjoy listening as much as we enjoyed recording. Happy New Year to all of you.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, liturgical musician, popcorn and podcast fanatic, and Kolbe homeschooling mom to 4 lads and lasses of middle and high school age.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
And I'm Jordan. As a product of homeschooling, I'm proud to teach Greek and Latin for Kolbe online and serve as the Alumni and Public Relations Director.
It seems fitting that we would start this by saying Willkommen. Is that the correct welcome in German? Willkommen.
Willkommen.
To our Between the Years party that we're having here. I think we need, to get the full effect though, I think we need the German name for that though, Jordan.
Zwischen den Jahren, they say, between the years.
Nice. Okay. So we have a special guest for our Between the Years party. We have a familiar voice to longtime listeners of the Kolbecast. My sister Hope, one of our original co-hosts from the relaunch of the Kolbecast. Hi, Hope.
Hi, I am so glad to be back with all of you and so glad to finally get to have a conversation with Stephen.
Yes, Hope, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Great to meet you as well, and great to be back with Bonnie and Jordan sharing the mic again.
Hope has been off mic, but working with us behind the scenes on the podcast these past several episodes, helping us with editing and show note writing and all kinds of ways. So she's still very much a part of the Kolbecast. It's great to have this quartet of folks here to visit for a bit, celebrating between Christmas and New Year's, and just kind of catching up a little bit since it's been a while since we heard from you, Hope. We also have some fun stuff to talk about in Jordan's world with the release of his book. It's very exciting. We heard about it in episode 7, I think. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. But it's here, Jordan. It's out in the world. It's exciting.
Yeah.
We're excited. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
It looks great.
It's finally here. It's been a long process, but it shouldn't have been. It's not that long of a book, but I just worked on it here and there, and it was a kind of writing where it just felt like I had to tell a story. So each chapter is kind of its own thing, just a memory that I had, and it doesn't really flow, I guess, in like between years 1980 and 1987. It's nothing like that, just a collection of memories. But
nice.
Anyway, I want people to read it, so I'm glad it's out now.
I'm so happy for you. I'm excited for you. These things, they take however long they need to take, right?
Yeah.
And remind me, Jordan, I seem to recall something about your students having a hand in the cover art. Am I imagining that, or is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what I did was I ran a contest for the cover art and let all my students, whoever wanted to, submit their work. It was everything from like stick figures to like really high quality stuff. A few really great ones that were hand drawn, and a few others that were painted of some images I had given them of my childhood home. But this one really stood out to Kolbe, so it's published by Kolbe Academy Press. So I was running everything by the people in the office who were kind of making those decisions. And we all really liked this one that a student, Lucy, one of my students, had created. And she basically at some point she handed it off to our in-house graphic designer, who was able to do a little tweaking with it and really make it look sharp on the page. And so one of the students is the ones who, and I couldn't be more proud of that a student had a hand in it, and she is too. I'm really glad, even with all the tweaks that came after her original work, she's proud of it too, which makes me very happy.
Sure.
It's really neat.
Yeah, well, I was talking with Stephen at another conversation about well, I was telling him how this book has taken years. There's a part in there where I even talk about I started it when we were living in a castle, an apartment in a castle in Germany, which
Oh.
feels like a lifetime ago to me now. But it was just when I was able to write down a few of these episodes that are in there, and so that's really the official beginning, and it's just now coming out, and as I said, it's not that long of a book, yet when I wrote my doctoral dissertation, which is published now, and it's incredibly dense and it's footnoted and all of that, that only took a year. So and I've changed a lot during that time. So I sort of had to say, whatever this book is, it's got to be done now. I want my students to read it. I don't want them to give it to their own children. I want them to read it themselves at some point, because it all goes by so fast. And I thought about just a little part towards the end of the book. Uh, so if anyone listening is familiar at all, the idea of the book is I had written it for my students about my own life growing up in the 80s and 90s being homeschooled. And towards the end of the book, as I was scanning through it earlier, I have this line where I say, the hologram of our modern lives can be pierced. One only needs the courage to realize that ours is the most human of religions, that God also pierced the veil by becoming fully human. May we each do likewise. I started thinking that's really far off from what I was first writing, because what I was first writing was like, when I was growing up, we lived in this little house out in the prairie, and my dad was a Protestant pastor, and then just describing family life. Somehow, in the long process of writing the book, I came out to more of a kind of a idea of like exhorting people, modern people, for the faith, and to be proud of be proud of what we've inherited, but also be ready to go into the future with all the treasures that we have in our faith. And so I didn't start out at all writing a book like that. Somehow, I don't know how that line crept in. I don't know how it all fits even. And probably my favorite chapter in the whole book is chapter 11, called Things Hidden. And there's several more chapters after that, but just in the final order of things, that one fell to chapter 11. And I wrote that, I think it was the last chapter that I wrote on the book, and it ended up being my favorite. And so I say all that just to talk about the whole process of writing it. There was no real structure. It was just a tale, really, just a series of tales that I tried to string into something, and then I end with this exhortation at the end.
Well, just to be contrary, I've been trying to hold myself back from providing any quotes for as long as possible, just because I knew that Jordan would tease me as soon as I came out with one. But hearing Jordan, you describe your book, just makes me think so much of Flannery O'Connor's remark that sometimes she didn't know what she thought until she read what she had written. And I've definitely experienced that in my own life, and it sounds like that may have had a hand in your book as well.
For sure. Yeah, that is a really relevant, I guess, approximation of a quote. But so it's coming out. It is, I guess I maybe that is the exact quote, but I'm just anyway. I do mention quite often how much I love the quotes that Hope provides. The only problem is if it comes from a work I haven't read, then I find myself buying it afterwards on Amazon, and usually not finding time to read it, but it's worth it just from the quote. So thank you. That is true. That a lot of the memories that I wrote about, I wouldn't have. I'm sure I wouldn't have remembered them ever. And they say that sometimes people who are older, that are at risk of dementia and Alzheimer's and these kind of diseases, they encourage them to write about their lives. And I think that there are like sort of doors inside your own memories that you you don't realize you have access to. So a lot of stuff that I put in here, when my siblings or my parents read it, they were like, wow, I hadn't thought of that in years, or I forgot about that memory. And I didn't put in all the ones they wanted me to, because I was sending some of them chapters ahead of time, and they would say, write about this, but it didn't really work that way. It was more like really internal. And so I would say with Flannery O'Connor, I didn't know what I thought as far as the whole structure, and I didn't even know what I remembered until it came out. I was amazed sometimes, where I was like, wow, I had not thought of that in years. And then when you put it together, I guess one of my major goals in writing it was to make it really aesthetically pleasing to the reader. So I was hoping to do that, just make it look beautiful. The place where I grew up does not look beautiful to most people. My brother visited there recently, and I haven't been there in years, but he was like, I cannot believe that we grew up there. It's just so dilapidated and all these things. And in my mind, I really valorized it. I left when I was 18, and I never lived there again. And I've been back a couple times, but hardly at all in all these 20 something years that I've been gone. But in my mind, it exists as this really beautiful place. So that was kind of one of my main goals, was I wanted to say that I could write something that was beautiful. And I picked apparently a very ugly place to do it about.
One of the really interesting things, and I know, Jordan, we've talked about this before, but in our family, we love the Elizabeth Enright books, and you go back into a different time, and you really kind of are immersed in this world that's different than what we live in. And we've talked at our dinner table here. It's just like, will that ever be written again? Because I don't see it today. And so, I mean, I see fantasy novels or science fiction novels or whatever, but I don't see somebody saying, here's what life is like now, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. And so it was so enjoyable to read the book, because that's what it reminded me of. It was this picture of, like, so I grew up around the same time in a different place, but it took me back, and it's like, yes, this is the time, but these are worthwhile, universal experiences. Well, okay, maybe not shooting people with BB guns, but I mean, my friends did. We didn't at our house, but my friends did. But it was that experience. The experiences were universal. So you were telling your story, but it was like the story of everybody who grew up in a place like that, or even if you didn't, to be taken to a place like that, which is, again, what we experienced with Elizabeth Enright. So I was very encouraged to have that experience of reading your book.
I really appreciate that, because that is something that along the way I realized I wanted to do, was that to really kind of show this. I In the book I call it a little bit nostalgia, like for this time before the internet sort of thing, where we are, those of us who grew up maybe even at the end of the 20th century, or we were born towards the end of it, but we had our coming of age years during that time. We experienced something that I feel like is closer to how our parents grew up than I personally feel to the generation that are kids now. I don't really pinpoint it exactly, but I do hope that readers will either feel like this is a, if they're readers who didn't experience it, they'll feel like this is very foreign to me. And if it's those of us who did experience it, they'll feel like this is very homey to me. This is something I haven't thought about for a long time. I mean, it's like we used to, playing basketball, we'd get thirsty and just go drink out of the garden hose of the person that lived closest to the basketball court.
Yeah.
We don't even, they weren't even in the game. It could just be the old man that lives close to the court, and we would go turn their faucet on and share it, all of us drinking out of it as soon as it turned cool, because remember how hot those things were in the summer.
Yeah.
But now that, I mean, I don't see kids doing that. I mean, they but maybe they're kids somewhere, but it doesn't. I think that that's like a specific memory from a specific era that I was privileged to belong to. And I wanted to sort of paint the picture of my, as you say, Stephen, like my own individual experience in that era, but it's also anyone who experienced it can relate. And that was one of the main things that I wanted to do also. So I mean, I say that the aesthetic beauty and that if that was all that I did in writing these pages, I would be completely satisfied. That's what I wanted to do.
It sounds very effective. And then coming through all the reminiscences, coming through that to arrive at the point that you were speaking of that surprised you, that the exhortation to readers, I think that gives it a lot of credibility, like because you recognize the gift that you've received and are able to speak to that. It's that gratitude that was evident when I talked to you about it a while back, and it's there again, and that is the kind of thing that's very attractive, that I think draws people into the beauty that goes on from there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for saying that, Bonnie. That actually, that's something that I really appreciate hearing, because so much of the temptation with the book was to sort of pinpoint it in a certain genre, or to try to make it give a certain message that wasn't necessarily what I had been doing for all these years. I mean, starting 8 years ago, usually if you have a point and you want to say this point, you don't take 7 years or whatever to get it out there.
Mhm.
So I had approached a few publishers. They wanted me to turn it more into a conversion story, which I think is great. I mean, I love reading conversion stories. I reading conversions of others was a huge help to me when I converted to the Catholic Church. But I didn't really want to do that. I guess I don't know. I had to sort of let it just be what it was. There is one draft probably in existence somewhere on my computer, who knows, that where I went back and I was trying to tell that story throughout. And so I was tailoring different chapters, dropping little hints, those sorts of things. And then, but it just didn't feel organic, and it didn't feel authentic. It felt like it was something really artificial placed onto the book, and it wasn't what I wanted. So as important as I think that is, if I ever did write a conversion story, it would probably be about St. Paul or somebody else with a way more important one than mine. So anyway, the book is what it is, and I hope that people would be interested in getting a copy and reading it and getting in touch with me.
I don't know how they couldn't.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I really like what See, I was the original prompt for the blooper reel because I had so many false starts. Bonnie likes to put all the blame on herself. It's not her, it's me. Anyway, I really like what you said, Jordan, about how your conversion is a piece of the book, but it was not authentic to make it the centerpiece of the story of your life, because it is more part of a fabric rather than a spotlight. And I think that that's something that I really admire in my Kolbe education, and in a lot of just Kolbe's approach, is that there are various Catholic organizations that shall remain nameless to protect the not so innocent, that really push for a testimony or a conversion, or what is the one day when you decided that everything changed, and either you've had that or you haven't. And it always felt very artificial to me. And I remember saying something to a friend about why are you pushing everybody to have a St. Paul moment? Like, not everyone has something so dramatic, and that doesn't make it any less important, any less profound if it's the slow, quiet working grace. I mean, that's more how grace often works, is the small, quiet voice in the fabric of your life. And so I think that that was a really brave, and in some ways, if Catholicism is countercultural, then you were almost like counter cultural except that normally with that, you'd have a double negative, so you'd be back to the regular culture, and that didn't happen. So I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I really admire that your story, that your book really reflects your experiences and these lessons that you've drawn from your life so far. And it's obvious to anybody who listens to you on the podcast or interacts with you through Kolbe or Magdalene or anything like that, that your conversion is the foundation of a lot of your current approach. And I think that it's better to see how that manifests itself when, as a friend of mine used to say, that your faith is the bookshelf that holds all the books rather than the biggest book on the shelf.
See, there you go, another quote, even though it, it's great.
Are you keeping a list or something? Jordan's holding. The listeners can't see it, but Jordan's holding a pen right now, and I'm pretty sure he's keeping a list.
I am. All right here. Well, what's interesting is that we're not done. Somehow this idea of the conversion makes it feel like, okay, you've converted and you've switched sides and it's over.
Check the
but
box.
it's a long formation. I'm a little bit in this world of classical education. I'm like, okay, so we read the great books, but let's create our own great books. Like we can write great books too. But formation is a long ongoing thing. And so when we talk about conversions, we think of it as like, boom, you switch teams. Now you're good. You're on this team. You're on the right team now, so you're good. But it keeps going. I mean, the game is just starting. You might be on the right team, but you're playing a game. And it reminded me, and maybe it's been a while. We have a lot of new listeners, and I wondered, Hope, if you might talk about when you have that story about receiving your first batch of Kolbe books and how that felt to you. Because speaking of a long journey,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And yeah, 'cause that was almost 15 years ago now, which is a little unbelievable. As Everett informed me last time I was on the podcast, you don't have quarterly exams anymore. You have midterms. So I apologize if my language is a little dated, um, but yeah, I guess for new listeners who have joined us recently, first of all, welcome. I'm really glad you're here, and I'm really glad you get to listen to these brilliant people host the podcast every week. So I was homeschooled all my life, but we did not start Kolbe until ninth grade. And I think if our mom and I could change anything about my homeschooling experience, we would have started Kolbe a lot earlier. But somehow it was meant for our path, kind of just as you were saying, Jordan, the very long road that we came to Kolbe for high school after trying a variety of things earlier. And I had no classical background. I couldn't tell you who a single Greek god or goddess was. I had gotten used to workbooks from Catholic homeschool publishers that everything featured a nun or a priest. And so it was a big change to get this gigantic box of books that had a variety of stories in them and know, oh wow, we're embarking on something completely new. So our mom and I laid out all the books on the living room floor along with the study guides. So there were usually 3 books, the book itself, the study guide, and then the teacher's guide. And we stepped back and we looked at them and we thought, wow, what have we gotten ourselves into? And that was the first and certainly not the last time that we thought that. It ended up taking us more than the standard 9 months to finish ninth grade because we took our time and really tried to get that foundation of classical education that I hadn't had up through 8th grade. We would work our way through the Iliad a little bit, realize that a lot of the references to mythology, I needed to stop and go back and read Deller's Book of Greek Myths or something like that. And along the way, with plenty of frustration because I was used to a lot of checklists and looking at lesson plans and seeing the amount of time allotted for something and then not meeting all of that time, just kind of working through all of my assignments and calling it a day. I couldn't do that with Kolbe. And there was some small voice in the back of my head recognizing I didn't want to do that with Kolbe. I would be missing some of the most important lessons that weren't explicitly spelled out in the lesson plans if I tried to phone it in. And I can say that clearly now, looking back, kind of like what you were describing, Jordan, that it definitely took from 9th grade to 11th grade before I could even really start to put words to that phenomenon, the ideas of breaking down these big works into manageable chunks, of breaking down the weekly lesson plans into daily assignments instead of looking at, oh my gosh, I have 100 pages to read in each of 3 subjects. How am I going to read 300 pages in a week? And getting stuck there, kind of spinning my wheels, learning how to say, this is the big goal, this is what I'm going to look at today. That was huge. I think the only thing more significant was recognizing the humility of saying, I will not be able to understand everything in this text, but I want to understand at least something. With Kolbe, learning how to zoom in and out between the forest and the trees, and then also learning how to manage my own expectations of myself, where I held myself to a high standard of getting things done and not saying this is too hard, I can't do it, but also recognizing I need to put this effort in, and it's okay if I don't get everything, because there are brilliant people who have been studying these things for years and they're still discovering more layers to these works of the canon. I don't know. At this point, I forget your original question.
No, that's great. No, I wanted to hear your initial encounter with getting all these books and how to handle them as a 14-year-old. What do you do? I love that you won't be able to understand everything, but you can understand something in it. I think that's an awesome way to approach it, because we're all kind of still like that, unless you're Anthony Esselin reading Dante or something. But even he says, all the times he's read it, translated it, there's always something new. You can't exhaust it. And I think that the mistake very often is, I should be able to do this. How come I can? And so you give up. And so I really like your story of, like, that you kept going through all these things, maybe looking for that one thing in each text or whatever to say you've learned something from it.
Yeah.
That certainly ties in with the conversion that you were
Oh.
talking about before, because I mean, just like when oh, I've converted. Now the story's ended. I understand all of Dante and the Iliad, and no, it's not what it is. It's a lifelong sort of learning. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even the little things like that, like I have a way more maybe I don't know what to call it, way more my book When the Earth Was Flat story about that. Like, as you say, I won't be able to understand everything in this text. I remember somebody telling me, when you get into like a wrestling match or even a fight with somebody bigger than you, understand you're not going to beat them, but you can hurt them. Like, if that's all that you do, you hurt them one way, one thing, make them remember, And so it's sort of, in a way, in my sort of a gangster background, I guess. I don't know. You, it's the same thing as, you won't be able to understand everything, but you can understand something from it. You're not going to be able to beat up your older brother, but you can make him remember. Don't get too close to my right hand or something.
Well, as a counterpart to your gangster childhood, I was a chess tournament kid with glasses for my childhood. And I remember being so frustrated sometimes because in the assignments of who we would play at these chess tournaments, I was almost right in the middle of the pack as far as US Chess Federation rankings. And the type of assignment system that they used meant that I kept being assigned the really good players, the like these people are going to go on to be grandmasters at some point, and I kept losing to them, and I felt so frustrated. I didn't want to go to tournaments anymore because I knew that I was going to lose. And then I think there was one tournament or something where their school had a conflict, and I ended up being one of the higher ranked players. And I won some of my games, but my US Chess Federation ranking went down. And then I went to my next tournament and I played the really good players again, and they beat me again. I think I lost 3 games, won 1, and there was 1 draw, and my ranking went up. And I said, "What is going on here?" And as it turned out, the USCF had accounted for that in their rankings program, that if you lost to a really highly ranked, really good player, your ranking would still go up because they recognize that you're going to learn from playing somebody who's so much better than you are. Whereas if you take kind of the route of playing a lot of people who were ranked lower than you were, then that could hurt you because you're not challenging yourself. Um, you're not developing in your skill, you may be developing bad habits. Yeah.
Chess is amazing in those ways, and it's not it's like the whole organization internationally is amazing, because I didn't play chess growing up, but I've always been fascinated by chess and chess players. And when I went to the Kolbe offices, you guys will remember Mike Pace, right?
Yeah.
Mike Pace, one of the Hall of Fame
Yeah.
advisors that was at Kolbe, and he was a really good chess player. I don't know where he ranks. I don't know exactly like what's a good ranking or whatever, but according to him, he had a pretty decent ranking for for where he was. And there was a guy, my kid's godfather in Germany, who was also a chess player that would he would teach chess and stuff in the little village there. And so I told Mike Pace when I got to Kolbe about this guy, and he was able to find him online and see his ranking and everything. And he was able to definitively tell me that if they played 10 times, he would beat my kid's German godfather like 8 out of 10 times. I was like,
Whoa.
but how do they know that? And he was like, well, it's the rankings and all of that stuff. So anyway, like I find that amazing, like that it's pinpointed that precisely, that even they know the stronger player,
Mhm.
you play the stronger player, you're going to come up in a way. And it goes back to your quote that you invented. I can't understand everything, but I might be able to understand something. So
Chess is scary because there's no chance involved. It's
Yeah.
so I don't play it because I want the lucky roll. I
Right.
don't want to
Yeah.
have to put in the work to be excellent, but there is no chance, which is
I mean, if it's a
Hmm.
given, it's kind of
incredible,
like, why?
really. Well, yeah, I'm not willing to put in the work myself, so I I know somebody's going to outwork me to be better at chess than I am, so it's not much fun.
did,
But
did you play chess, Bunny, also, or
Nope.
that was just Hope's thing?
I'm not a chess player. No. But I am very much intrigued at what happens in conversion stories after conversion, like how that is sustained or not. So that it's going back a little bit, and we don't have to stay there very long. I was just going to throw that out there, that it's the living out, it's the long continual process. You have to work to sustain it and grow in it. And what
well,
happens when you don't?
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I was gonna say, is there such a thing as after conversion?
Yeah.
Yeah, that just hit me tonight when we were talking about it. When I'm like, wow, that's crazy, because we are always, at least as a Protestant coming in, Protestants are always thinking, Stephen, maybe I don't know in your denomination if it was the same thing, but in mine it was like, when you are saved, once saved, always saved. That's a saying they have: once saved, always saved.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I found that not to be true since I've become a Catholic. I'm constantly having to strive more and face challenges and things, and I can't just write it off like, well, I'm saved and whatever, it'll pass.
Yeah. Right.
It's a new thing.
It's like the liturgical year, of course, because I mean we go through the same readings, the same, Advent, Christmas, little bit of ordinary time. Lent, Easter, more ordinary time, every single year, and it's this cycle. So but then each time there's the rise, there's the fall, there's the story. So I mean, I think it's the work towards realizing it's not all about you, I guess, is probably the thing which is really hard for me. But that no matter how much progress you make, you're just in one of those cycles essentially before you realize you're going to have to cycle again. And I was recently reading about like St. John of the Cross and the dark night of the soul and things. And I'm not, I mean, boy, do I wish. No, I don't. I'm not ready for that. But I wish I were ready for that. But they talk about how you draw closer, but then pride and all of those things kind of start to rise up. But God, who loves you, takes you back and kind of reprimands you a little bit and gives you the things that you need to keep moving on to the next step. And Mother Teresa is another example of that. Who you think, oh, all of these blessings, all these wonderful things. Well, then God just says, well, okay, just love me because I'm worth being loved. And you get no extra, you get no benefits from this, really. I mean, natural benefits, obviously, but that's incredible, but also, humbling because you're never there. You're just,
Yeah.
you might be in Lent at this point where you're kind of dying to yourself, and then you might be in Easter for a while, or there's just all of these things, but it's gonna cycle around again for most of us, at least.
The law of undulation. I think I had
Yeah,
mentioned that on an
yeah.
early podcast episode. There's a Screwtape letter about the law of undulation, and the Screwtape, the master tempter, tells his nephew Wormwood that one of the best ways to get humans to sin is to try to convince them that things should be static, and if things are undulating, they're doing something wrong. And so the universe is built to undulate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That is so true. I mean, it's so clearly true, yet we ignore it all the time because we think we want to be angels, right? I mean, but think about when you're tired. Well, for me, think about when I'm tired. How patient am I with my children when I am tired or when I am hungry or any of these? I mean, has such a huge influence. Okay, so I'm speaking to myself here, but think about when you don't take care of those physical things, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage to be able to pursue a life of virtue because you're increasing the passions that we are rational animals. We are still animals. We have all of those things working, and we're in a fallen state. So if you're tired because your muscles aren't strong enough to just carry you about, you going up and down the stairs or whatever, then you're tired faster than you should be.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense, but not easy to remember every day.
Right.
Well, it fits in a lot, like routine. I mean, we all know routine is super important, but what you were saying, Stephen, about the cycles, like the liturgical calendar, all of that, it's interesting because it's almost like that's a little tiny leftover from the pagan world, which was always the eternal return, right? So
Mhm.
it's always, they had no idea of like linear history that came in with the incarnation. And now what are we going to do? Because Jesus interrupted all this idea of these eternal return. So cyclical calendars, it's kind of interesting. And I had never thought about it till you were saying that. The cyclical calendar that you can't quite complete each year, and you're going to repeat it the next year, all of that. It's almost like a little bit of the world that was. And in general, we humans are made that way. So routine, why do we thrive with routines? Why? Like it, you know that you do, and you know that others do, but why is that? So if you go to the gym at this certain time, you wake up at this certain time, you do this at another time, you feel happier, and your body shows it. I mean, you look better, you feel better, all of that. So it's interesting how much we still are like animals and a little bit pagans even, you know?
Routine, it frees you up for higher things, really, right? Because, I mean, if you have to think through every step of the day, all of that mental capacity is going to, what am I going to
Yeah.
eat for breakfast? When am I going to go out?
Yeah.
What car am I going to drive? Where am I going to go? But if you just have that routine, it's all freed up for other things. I get up, I eat my breakfast, I do this, I do that, and then you can think, you can go through all of that without like you drive a car. You don't, when you start driving a car, everything is, okay, I gotta be careful. I can't brake too hard. I can't accelerate too fast. I have to be careful about how quickly I'm turning. But once you've got that down, you don't think about it. You can be praying, you can be thinking about whatever you want in the car, because all of that is ritual. Well, it's muscle memory and other things as well. But routine is the same sort of thing. It frees you to not think about those mundane things. It frees you to think of other higher or mundane things,
Yeah.
other mundane things, but whatever, what other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I know, like, I've talked to you guys privately about my basketball coaching. I am exhausted by the end of the game. Yet when I teach a Latin class, because I've done it for years and it's routine to me, I could, I could teach back to back to back to back to. I could keep going and not really feel physically tired or mentally tired. So in that sense, also that's true, that the things you really get good at, it kind of frees you up to build on those and sort of acquire or have the capacity to acquire higher things beyond those. But when it's new to you, it really demands everything and it wears you out.
Yeah, it's Stephen Covey who does the 7 habits and the 8th habit. We'll talk about that. You say you get extremely fit men, and he'll ask one of them to come up and try to do 20 push-ups on the stage where he's presenting. And they're fit, but they don't do push-ups. So he said they'll struggle to do 20 push-ups on the stage. And yes, they're good at what they're doing, but it's something, even for them, it's something new, and that's hard. Something new is hard, even if you've prepped in different areas. So that's good.
Yep.
It's at some point we should have a conversation about the fact that not taking for granted the things that we're doing. So like me teaching Latin, and I'm like, okay, these kids are here for a
Yeah.
reason. We're praying in Latin ahead of time, because is it a job in the sense that a lot of people are out there delivering donuts or doing whatever
Yeah.
they do. That would be interesting, is like this sort of reminding ourselves of why we do what we do.
Sounds like it's a wonderful life for
Exactly.
for
Yeah.
Exactly.
for
That's
Kolbe
right.
families, maybe. Yeah. What
Yeah.
happens if you're just plucked out? You're no longer there. Who's making breakfast? Who's taking the kids to
Yeah.
practice?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
Yeah. Jordan is our Clarence, right?
Yeah.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, yeah. I love that movie. I hadn't watched it for like ever. Like I'd only seen the clip that's on Christmas Vacation, when she's like, every time a
Yeah.
bell rings, and I'm like, what is that from? So I Googled it once, and it said It's a Wonderful Life, and I read a little bit about it, and then I watched it, and I loved it, and it's become my favorite of the Christmas
Yeah.
movies.
Yep. This has been fun having you back, Hope, getting the quartet together.
It's been great to be back. It's a lot of fun.
I like this tradition, this between the years tradition. I was not familiar with it until I met you, Jordan. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Let's keep it up. We'll do it again.
Sounds good.
Hope, it was nice to have you on here again. I hope it's the first of many more to come.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome back, and I'll always be around.
Thank you, Jordan and Stephen, for all that you do to make this podcast what it is.
Thank you.
And Hope, thank you for all your work as well behind the scenes. And now I'm so glad to have you back on mic with us. And I really appreciate all of you all. And I'm looking forward to what's yet to come and the conversations that we'll have. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you haven't already, subscribe to the Kolbecast in your favorite podcast app to make sure you don't miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam.